Great, and we're live. So welcome everybody to this remote interview. My name is Lisette, and I'm interviewing people and companies doing great things remotely. And today on the line, I have something exciting. I have Scott Hoppe from San Francisco, California, where I lived for almost 10 years. So I feel a little bit homesick just hearing San Francisco. But Scott, you are the CEO of Hoppe Tax. I'm going to say hoppetax.com. And it's a 100% distributed accounting firm.
That's right.
So we are going to get way into that. But let's start with the first question, which is, what does your virtual office look like?
Thanks, Lisa, for having me. And my virtual office for myself looks like a standing desk inside of my home. I've tried having an office space before, and it wasn't the right fit. So my own office is inside of our 2-bedroom apartment, which, since you're from San Francisco, 2 bedrooms is like a premium.
Palace.
It's a palace, yeah, so to speak. At my 900 square feet palace. And I've sectioned off part of the room that's the baby section for our newborn, and then the other half, or I should say 1/3, is for my office, and that's where the wall backs into, and we have a whiteboard set up. But beyond me, I have team members in the United States, in Florida, in LA, California, so Los Angeles there, Boston, Massachusetts, and in Ohio, just right outside of Columbus. And we all work virtually from our home.
So why didn't the office space work for you?
I went out initially I transitioned from a very traditional public accounting background, and in accounting, traditional means there's an office space, it's very hierarchical. And when I left public accounting, I worked for an architecture firm, still a service industry and a service company, but now you're going from that analytical mindset to the creative mindset. And you saw the similarities that exist across the two styles of firms, and you saw the differences with the mindsets. And I like that, the culture, the forward-thinking side of the design firm. So when I decided 3 years ago, I'm ready to pull the trigger and open up my own practice, I wanted to be different than what's existed. And I had to break the norms and the things that I was comfortable with, the physical office, the paper trail, everything that I known. And I did that by making sure my practice had no office, worked with clients 100% virtually or digitally is how I say it, and created a workflow using Google Drive and some of the other tools to remove paper from start to finish. There's sometimes when we have exceptions to that because the law doesn't let us have all electronic filings.
Right.
But those are the exceptions. And that for 2 years, that's how it went. And then we started expanding the team, the practice. All of the clients were used to working together virtually, and I had an office just to give myself space. And in the end, I was just sitting in the office. It was kind of cool because you could see like the trolley cars in San Francisco, and that was nice. But I was sharing it. Office space is expensive here, so I was sharing days. And it was just too much of a hassle to try to coordinate days with someone else. And I was like, I'm not trying to make this more difficult. This whole idea is like, I'm working remotely because this is supposed to be the future. In the future, right. I need to work wherever I'm happiest and however I want and wherever I want. I'm working from home. So I shut the office down after 3 months, and I couldn't be happier.
It does even say on your website, remote work feels like the future. Why does it feel like the future to you?
I have a really just when I left public accounting, I had this notion that I was like, something's broken here. The focus wasn't on the people. The focus was on hiring the people and getting people to do the work, but it felt profit driven. Everything felt profit driven, whether we were doing community activities or not. And I was like, this is their success model, but it isn't the model that I would consider the success model for a remote company or for any company. So it feels like the future for me because we can be very forward thinking in how we treat our people and letting people work how they want and where they're comfortable. They can be in their PJs. They could not be in their PJs. I wouldn't know the difference. It becomes results oriented, not butt in the chair oriented. And it also starts allowing us to work with our clients in the way that they work with their CPAs. Pretty much every person I talk to, whether they're comfortable with working with a 100% distributed company or not, works with their accountant primarily by email or phone.
Right. Like, who goes to the accountant's office these days?
No one. That's the answer. That I haven't talked to one person where they're like, yeah, every quarter I sit down with my accountant. It's not the style. It's not how we do it. So we figured, you know what? By putting ourselves in this position to only be 100% virtual, now we have to support it. We're all in. We have to build every system around this. It's not a second thought. It's the only thought. And that mentality and that shift and that mindset of always trying to improve the system we have has allowed what I think for us to build a much better culture and experience for the clients around the whole paperless start to finish process, as well as that commitment that we're trying to build and that community we're trying to build with our clients digitally, which may also be the key to like, what's the biggest challenge of running a business this way, especially a service business? How do we not make it feel, how do you make people feel that commitment with us when there's never been that face-to-face, or potentially has never been that face-to-face high trust interaction?
Indeed. So how do you do it? So you're saying your clients, you're trying to build this this trust relationship with your clients, but of course you're not meeting them over lunch or martinis or whatever. I have this image that like accountants meet their clients over martini lunches or something. I don't know. Maybe it's
yeah.
I'd be like toast.
That may be the lawyers. The lawyers will take you out and make sure the clock's running for them.
Right. Smart of them. I don't know who does martini lunches, but man, I'm toast after a martini. But so how do you build that trust with the clients? And my next question then also, or tied into that, is what are our clients hesitant about working with an all virtual company?
You know, it's been interesting because in the time that it's been going on, it's grown, it's expanded. I started out as a solo entrepreneur, and I had it in my head, maybe I will just be myself. I'll develop a comfortable practice and I'll be okay. Mind you, my wife's also a CPA, which is radically awesome when you're inside a home and you can bounce ideas off of each other,
totally.
Especially when it's very technical, like the work we do. So we're looking at like the client interaction and being virtual, and we're thinking, I'm solo. I need to find myself, because how can the clients ever buy into me if I'm not bought into me? And this was a big challenge. It took 3 years, honestly, and a lot of dedication in the last 6 months of focusing on the why. But I went through these evolutions of working by myself, realizing that some of the things that I thought were barriers in my career that were external, like, oh, I wasn't taking care of myself because the firm was asking so much from me, taking my time. I realized it was actually, I was the barrier. I was stopping myself from going on that run, eating right, not being as stressed as I should be. So the initial transition was going with intent. And all of a sudden you're like, okay, great. Now we know about intent. Let's keep moving forward though. And now once you start working on this intent, I was able to work on a framework for my intentions, which follows this F5 framework, and it has to do with the 5 buckets of my life that I want to know how I'm prioritizing things: faith, family, friends, fitness, and finance. And those are really important to go through, and so important. I'll just say it one more time. It's faith, family, friends, fitness, finance. And why those are so important is you need to know what the order is for you and your ideal order, so that you can see when you're in and outside of the balance and where you want to be. So my ideal would be faith first, then family, then fitness, then friends, then finance. Well, now I know that, I was able to reflect and contemplate, and I came up with, well, what am I actually doing? Well, what I was actually doing was it was flipped. I had finance at the top on how I was making decisions. Then it was fitness, not too far off. Then family, then friends, and then faith at the bottom. And I'm like, whoa, faith, spiritual, community. That faith contains like volunteering and spiritual aspects. If that's number one for me, why am I treating it like it's number 5? Perfect. Because of having the intentions, I was able to flip that around and work on it. That's all fine and dandy, but I started realizing that to get the true intention, you need to have clarity on your purpose. Oh, that's the big question.
Indeed.
So that's something you can't rush, but your why has to be one of the most complex things to work on, because it's in every decision you make. It's in every action you have. It's in everything that you're doing. It's staring you at your face, right in your face. It's there, but you can't see it. And that challenge took a long time to work through. And now we do have more clarity on it, and we were able to write it out into like a manifesto. And then that's how we could start distributing it to our team, so they're all working in the same direction. And now when we're talking to our clients, they know which direction and why we're making decisions, how we're making it, and why we work like we work. And it removed from the table, and I'll describe the why too. We'll put the cliffhanger there.
Totally.
But what it did for our clients was it transitioned the conversation from being, okay, so can we meet face to face? And I'm like, oh, that's an awkward one. How do I don't want to say no. This is my first time talking to them, but it's a no. Every time I violated that, by the way, the clients turned out to be not the right person for me.
Oh, interesting.
Which I was like, quick learn. Don't do that again. If they can't start working with me without meeting me, it shouldn't be the right client, and I need to move on. But we were able to avoid that question now, because I don't have to meet them face to face. I'm like, look, our why is about designing, it's about being pioneers and building the brand new framework for a modern accounting firm. We can't be pioneers and build a new accounting firm if we're doing things the old way.
Why do you think old accounting firms aren't embracing the flexible work more often?
It's interesting because I think you've talked about this in some other episodes, and there's definitely articles out about it. And this idea of when you're a remote employee at an accounting firm, a traditional accounting firm, whether they see it or not immediately, you're a second-class citizen. You're all of a sudden removed. There's all this banter. There's all this stuff going on in the office, and you're not part of it. And no one's giving you the hour catch up on what happened at the water cooler. Or more importantly, when you're in a meeting, I felt this a lot at the design firm, because I rolled out offices around the world. So we had a lot in Europe, Australia, South America. And I would be working across language barriers, time zones, cultures, and video to coordinate the legal aspects of opening up a firm and the tax consequences. So when you're talking about those topics with different cultures, you start realizing some people are all virtual while the rest of the teams inside of a meeting room, you don't even know it. And you already have a bias towards the people in the room. I was cognitive, but I'm not saying everyone may be aware of it as easily or as quickly.
Well, it's so dangerous. Natural. I mean, it's like somebody sitting next to you. It's so natural. There's just no comparison. I mean, there is. You could use telepresence and all. Okay, of course, I think there's a comparison, but yeah, it's very hard. It's very hard.
And when you start getting into these very competitive environments of accounting, which there's the big four, and I worked at Ernst & Young and PwC, and there's two more, Deloitte and KPMG. These are high caliber environments, very smart people, but the culture and the mentality that goes around it, it's up or out. It's hard to put the brakes on. And for the last 30 years, we've done a lot in accounting to actually promote, to make sure women are moving up the ranks, because we weren't being intentional about that before and it wasn't happening. And now it's better. But even with that, if you have a kid and you're like, okay, great, I'll go back part-time and I can support having my family and I can have a job, a career. I think that's amazing. The problem now is inside of accounting, what we tend to see is when you make that decision to go part-time, you're working 45 hours a week.
Right.
Because that is part-time.
Right.
And
I love what you said earlier about that profit-driven wasn't the success model that you wanted for yourself. And I can really relate to that because I also had the same when I built my business. I joined the Happy Melly Network. It's a professional happiness association because profit was important, of course. I want to make money just like the rest of them. I want to buy the shoes that I want to buy and, the vacations I want to go on. I want it all too. But I didn't want that to be the only thing that was driving my business. I also wanted to be happy at work. And so I wanted to join a network of people that valued that also. So I can see this whole up or out attitude in this competitive environment. It's really good for some, but for the others that want like good work-life balance or to spend time with their family, that is not the environment that you necessarily want to thrive in. So I can totally see that.
And being a new parent, I mean, that's added a twist on because I've now started a little more background about me and why I worked and focused so much on the accounting industry and the model. I actually got my doctorate in accounting focused on the models that we have for the office environment and the culture and how it does or doesn't promote people who leave the firm to recommend people to work back for the firm or to bring business back. So looking at like alumni employees, how willing are they to say, you know what, Scott, I worked at PwC and they were super supportive. They were great. You should work there. Or would they say, my experience not so hot. Maybe you should look at a different firm or it makes sense to go regional. Employees are high demand. Clients are high demand, good clients. And oftentimes your alumni are from PwCs and the sorts. They're working at high caliber firms, which could in turn bring back very, very good business to the practice. But you may jeopardize that if you're not treating them right. So I think fundamentally this profit model of only focusing on the dollar, not everyone's like that. I should also caveat this.
Of course.
It's not all evil. There's plenty of very, very good people in there that are people first. It just gets lost among some of the others, the more traditional formats where they are on the profit driven. They think that you have this dichotomy between, well, if we're completely at odds if we put our people first with profits and bottom line.
Right.
And I don't think that's true.
Yeah. I hope you're right. I think you're right as well. I mean, I think there's
so.
A whole new generation of people who are more interested in experience than over profit necessarily. I mean, we all want to make enough money to survive. And then there's all this other stuff on top of that. So you've set up your firm to be 100% distributed. I want to talk a little bit about how you guys work amongst yourselves. What are the tools that you use? How do you communicate and how do you know what each other are doing? Let's dive into that. So I guess let's start with tools. Like what are some of the tools that you guys use?
Everyone loves a good tool.
For sure, especially me.
I think I'm addicted to your 8-minute updates on the new tools. I don't have to do the research.
Right, exactly.
So when I'm looking at the tools that we use with accounting, I'll start with the general stuff that I think is really great, and then some specific things we have to use in accounting. Because it's not all there. It's not all in the future like it should be. So we're very much along the lines, and we're purposeful in the tools that we picked, using Asana, using Slack. We use the G Suite, so Google Drive's a big play on that. We do not email each other, but we email clients. So that's been phenomenal for, I would say, a happy inbox is a happy life. And having all of the internal emails removed from your Gmail, and now it's only client-facing ones, easier to manage. The noise, I don't have to open up my email. I can be in Asana and practice. But the tool that was unique for me in this realm that's been super helpful in productivity is our timesheet software, and that's OurStack. And OurStack integrates in with your Google Calendar, Asana, Slack. And what OurStack does for us is allows you to stack your boxes so you can create your to-do list for the day with budget time allocations. So you can say, I think this interview is going to take me an hour and a half. I start the clock. And when we reach an hour and a half, it won't stop the clock, but it will say, hey, you're out of time. Well, now when we're looking back at some projects that we have, it's easy to dive really deep into the details of these tax technical topics. It kind of gives you a stop point to be like, okay, have I gotten as far as I should have gotten in 2 hours? Yes, no.
Right. Plus, as accountants, also, you probably are charging clients not by the hour, but you're probably tracking. I mean, I remember when I worked in engineering, we tracked all of our costs to a particular project. So it'd be like 3 hours on this project, 1 hour on that project, and then you had to, like, that's how we tracked it. I'm assuming accounting is a little bit similar.
Yeah, very much so. In the traditional model, again, it's typically the billable hour. Sometimes there's flat rate. Well, what I've focused a lot on is the flat rate, the value pricing, which means the client knows what they're paying. And if we're to go over that, it's up to us to come to them to say, hey, you know, there was this aspect of the engagement that we didn't identify, or new facts came up. It blah, blah, blah. And let's work out the new scope and the new pricing. But what I like about that is it changes that responsibility from the client to us to have that conversation. Right. So now when we finish the work, we're not sending an invoice that's triple the amount than the client ever expected. And the client definitely didn't authorize it, but it was up to them to be aware of it and not for us to tell them and for us to stop and ask them. We're either eating the costs or we're asking them, and you know we don't want to eat the cost. So
right.
Now they're in the power seat, and that's really cool for the client. They get to make the decision. That's unique for us. I will be very honest, and behind the red velvet rope, for the first 2.5 years or 2 years, we didn't really track hours because I cared about results. And I was like, look, we're getting this off the ground. All that matters is a happy client, anything to get the job done. Now we are expanding. We're in the 200 plus client range. We have a bigger team. It's getting more important for us to introduce the time tracking to know not really if we're billing enough for the client, but is there something we need to train on? Is there an aspect that this person needs to get help on? Are they spending too much time somewhere? And it allows us to coach better. At least that's the idea and how we plan to use it.
I mean, I have to say, I tracked my own time for years and years and years, and just to see where it was going and how much time I was spending on certain projects. And it was, I don't do it anymore only because I did it for so long that I know exactly about where things go. So after a while, you get a feel for it. It's like tracking your calories or something. Like after a while, you just know, like, oh, this has so much and this has so much. So yeah, I can imagine that it's good that would be good for that. So Hour Stack, that's a new one. I haven't heard of it. So that's
so that was a neat one for us.
I bet. I can imagine that's especially for your line of business, super handy for that. So one thing about Slack that I wanted to ask, a lot of people say the whole signal to noise thing in Slack is really difficult. You just get so much. It's like instant message on speed somehow. So it's how do you manage that? Or if you do, I don't know if you guys are like maybe you're super disciplined and you only sell things as needed, but most people struggle with this.
I would say that right now we're going, our typical styles, let's cast the net wide and hone it in. So how our Slack currently looks is we have it all alphabetical, and we do 0- whatever, maybe a general admin thing. So we have a 0- main, a 0- what are you up to? Got that from your Slack channel. I like the working out loud idea. We have a main channel, the fun and family channel, that what are you up to channel. Then we get into, we have admin channels, and we call those like hashtag HT, short for hobby tax, sales, email, because someone manages my email inbox and we can communicate there, or we can get other team feedback for quick ones. Basically what we're trying to do is keep all the quick communications, the under 5-minute stuff, inside of Slack when it comes to tasks. And anything over that 5 minutes that needs multiple inputs, it's usually in the sauna. But we're practicing and we're feeling out right now is there too much noise? Do we have the integration set up with Slack and Asana where it's bombarding you with double information, and we're working on it, but we've managed it by creating those admin channels and then all these client channels. So every client has an indicator, usually their business name, because we work primarily with businesses. And when we work with the businesses, it's them and the individual's return. So if you're a corporation, it's going to be Sandy owns the corporation of Sandy. We work on the corporate returns, but then we also do the owner's returns. So sometimes if it's depending on what type of company it is, we may do the individual and the personal under one channel, or if they have multiple entities, we'll break out the entities and then have an individual channel just for them.
Yeah. So it sounds like you really break out the channel so that everybody only joins what they absolutely need and want to join, so that you could kind of break out the noise that way. And
yeah,
I'm sure
that's the strategy so far, and it's been going well. I don't know as we go, because we're expanding and we're looking to grow, and that's the direction that we're going to. Again, coming back to our why, if we're looking to create the modern framework for accounting industry, we can't stop where we're at, because no one at the bigger level is going to bother to change. They're like, okay, great, it works for you, little guy.
Right.
But when we get to that critical mass, so maybe it'll turn into having multiple Slack teams and client channels underneath there. But I don't know how that will exactly be organized. And I heard an idea. I was listening to Zapier's CEO's he was interviewed in a podcast. I think it was called Productivity Podcast. And I just stumbled upon it. And he talked about the bots were creating too much noise in the channels. So they put all the bots inside of a single channel. So if you wanted the update, you go to that channel and you get it. If you don't worry about it.
Right.
I thought that was a good strategy.
Love it. So it looks like you have people on all coasts and in the middle: Florida, California, Massachusetts, and Ohio. Why there? Is there a tax purpose, or was that just the best people you could find?
So Ohio is Sarah, and she's my admin and helps me out tremendously with everything day to day. And the rest of the people are actually just CPAs that are amazing. I am so lucky to have them on the team. Each one brings something to the table. So California and the Northeast, New York, Massachusetts, and Jersey, that area, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh. I'm thinking of the cities there. But in Pennsylvania, the taxes are incredibly complex. California is very complex. So by having someone in each one of those hubs, we have deep knowledge of the two most complex areas. And most of the times, businesses operating in California are also operating in the Northeast.
Oh.
So that's been very helpful to have that overlay.
So did you seek out someone then specifically for that area because of the complicated tax laws, or was it by chance?
I would say more, I got lucky. I got very lucky to come across and be able to interview Evelyn, who's in Boston. Before that, what I was looking for was someone with that public accounting, the Big Four experience, knowing that those clients at that size would be both in California and East Coast, and counting on that exposure. But also, when you have someone that's really, really good and you can research issues, you have a level of familiarity. There are nuances in the law, but you just have to know there's a nuance to go look it up. There's no way you're putting the nuance and every little exception into your head. And so I was looking more with people with growth mindsets to steal the Carol Dwight book. And during the interview process, which maybe I should say that for another question. I
was going to say that is actually the next question is, how did you know that these guys would be great and girls would be great as in a distributed accounting firm?
Yeah, that's something that I would say in the very beginning, I hired people that weren't the right fit. And I started talking to a couple of my mentors that are the PwC. They retired from that, so they were partner throughout. And I'm like, look, I'm screwing up. I feel like I'm screwing up here, but it wasn't that bad. But I felt like I'm screwing up. And they go, you know what? Hiring and people is like anything. You just got to practice. You got to fail and you got to learn. And that's the only way. He's like, it's not a virtual, it's not a physical office difference. It's
an experience thing.
It's an experience.
I've heard the same thing. People always say in every company, people have a hard time hiring people co-located or remote. And of course, everybody's on their best behavior in the beginning, right? It's like dating. You have to date for 6 months before the weird stuff comes out. And it's the same.
It's really cool about what we do though, is because everything's virtual in our worlds, we can now be very intentional about the steps that we take. it doesn't have to be loosey-goosey. It doesn't have to go any old way. It's not just show up to the office and let's figure it out and they go to person. So I took all those experiences and bundled it up into a few different flows. And one of them is, before you even get to the interview, we have a quiz on Google that asks 8 questions, because you have to balance the amount of questions, the responses that you'll get with the quality of information about mindset. And out of the gate, if you're not getting a 6 out of a 8, a 7 out of, really a 7 or an 8 out of 8, which means you have a growth mindset, I'm not really that, I don't have time. Unfortunately, I don't have time to talk to you, and I have to filter that out at the door. And that was a hard one that I put on that I didn't have until LA, Daphne. So actually everyone is everyone's ladies here, which is awesome.
Totally awesome. Bonus
very
points.
Cool. I know. I feel like I had an HR professor in my doctorate program, huge feminist. I read a couple of the books on breaking the mold, and I was like all inspired. She's so proud of me now.
I bet.
But I didn't do it for that. These people are just amazing, and they're so good natured. And by putting this filter in, the conversations that we have now in Slack and among the team and virtually and during all these video interviews or our video calls, we default to video calls pretty quick, by the way. It's so positive. And your mentality is always in this growth mindset of, no, we don't have limits. We only have options. Let's keep moving that way. And before, I wasn't so intentful about this, and I don't feel like our conversations are as open, or there could have been friction in the mindsets and you just weren't that aware of it. So a simple fix, set up a quiz.
Okay.
I share that with anyone that's interested. I'm sure it'll improve by the time someone listens to this and they can have it. They can have the playbook.
Yeah, because people still have to implement it. So even if they try to copy you, they have to actually, it's not a copy thing. Most people still have to actually do it. And a lot of people don't do it.
Yeah.
Okay. So in terms of hiring, you first do this quiz, you weed people out, and then of course you start having conversations. And one thing that you just said that interested me was that you quickly default to video calls. Uh-huh. So when do you default to video calls? Is it after it starts getting complicated, you just click a button, or what's your behavior?
When I'm going to sound like I'm on the Zapier train because it just happens. When I first started the practice, I was like, yeah, 100% virtual. And then I went into this, it's all about client experience, and it still is. It's 100% client experience, but it evolved beyond me. And I had to look for inspiration in new spots as it's evolved. Once we got to this 100% distributed and the team really started expanding and getting bigger, I've had to spend more time looking and researching and reading about our Zapiers, our buffers, and the likes. So, of course, I read Rework and all the good stuff there. And then Zapier actually he came in again. I think it's Matt came in again and did a live presentation down in San Francisco at one of the workshops. So I went. And this was when I got introduced to this concept of bandwidth. And I didn't realize, I didn't put a framework around how we should communicate until then. And he goes, look, we're operating on this bandwidth, and we're at a low bandwidth in communication and a high bandwidth in communication. We're at a low bandwidth when we're online and we're not saying anything. We're at a high bandwidth when we're in person. And I'm like, that makes sense. What I found fascinating about it was, he goes, the virtual office defaults to the low bandwidth, no communication, but no distractions. The physical office defaults to high bandwidth, high distractions. I'm like, great, I'm on board. How do you know when to move? And he goes, okay, so you're going from no communication to text, let's just say text to video, I'll skip phone, to live. Well, in the text conversation, when you see the 3 little dots pop up and people are typing, or in Slack, you see their name and they're typing, that's fine. When one person says something, then you respond and say something. Then they say something, you say something. Then all of a sudden a third person comes in and says something. And then you're responding to the initial message. And then all of a sudden someone's responding, and it starts getting really messy because you're crossing lines on the communication. That's your trigger to go to video. Okay. If you didn't already have it. And I took a hold of that. We default to video quicker than that. We're like pretty fast on it, and that will be inside of my team agreement once we formalize it.
Awesome.
Because I realized in the beginning when you brought new people on, they didn't realize something that we were just doing so naturally, jumping to video. They didn't know, they weren't aware. So you have to write it down. Now when they come on, the onboarding experience is improved because they know how we operate, more clarity, and they can get ramped up really fast.
Yeah, indeed. When we're in an office, you can see how people are behaving and sort of copy and model your behavior at first compared to other people. And you and I were talking about, sorry, what?
Social proof is like when we look to the others for what we're supposed to do or not do.
Totally. I mean, because, you're new in an office, you don't want to step on toes and you sort of want to be polite. I mean, it's just like the beginning of any relationship, right? Like you want to just sort of check out, like see what other people are doing. But on a remote team, we don't have that at all, that context. And I like what you called it before. We have these ghost agreements where.
Oh yeah, the ghost contracts.
The ghost contracts. Yeah, I really like that. It's like where we just assume behavior but we can't see each other on remote teams. So that's why, the team agreements come in, because it makes it really easy for everybody just to standardize, like, okay, what's normal behavior for our team? Super important.
For the people that don't know anything about ghost contracts, because I didn't, I learned it in college when you're living with new people and someone's doing the dishes, someone's not doing the dishes, and you don't set up any formal agreement on who's supposed to do it, but the person that tends to do it keeps doing it, and the person that doesn't do it keeps not doing it. And these are ghost contracts that you've set up, and whether it's formalized or not, you've agreed, Scott, you're the dishwasher. Fred, you're not the dishwasher. And by pure action, it's established. Well, like we're talking about here, you don't get that ghost contract, really the ability to set that up, kind of, because a lot of the team agreement comes from things that you start naturally doing in Slack that wasn't formalized. Right. And you're like, oh, that's a good idea. But then you formalize it. Otherwise, it will never disseminate.
Right. Indeed. So we're reaching the top of the hour, I'm noticing, which is crazy because I have all these questions, but I want to make sure to be mindful of the time. I want to ask you about advice for people who are starting out with, for virtual, like for people who are looking for accountants or businesses looking for accountants, like what advice would you give about working with virtual? Say somebody wants to go virtual.
Yeah.
What's your advice for them?
I would say if you're a business owner, it's really, really imperative to be intentful about the people that you spend your time with. And you have the Jim Rohn saying you're the average of the five. And when you look at that in your business, if you're trying to be future and forward thinking, if you're trying to work in that mentality, you're trying to use the tools this way and you're trying to go that direction and you're trying to grow, get someone on board that's also going that direction with the same mentality. Otherwise, they're going to be like, you're going to talk to your accountant for advice, and they're going to be like, well, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? I don't get it. Is it to save money? Is that why you're cutting the office out? No, it's never about that. And it's always about the culture side. So for the business owner, the best thing you can do is interview enough people and worry about who's the person I'm working with. Will they take me in the right direction? Do we have... I'm almost catching myself. He's like, oh, maybe you don't necessarily want to just have everyone with the same mindset moving in the same direction, because then how do you get a broader opinion? But in reality, it's like, no, you want people that are going to lift you up and raise the bar and help you establish that your standards can be better or greater than they were by yourself individually. And I look for business owners that do that for me. And I have a feeling that it's the same thing gets reciprocated back.
Yeah, and I think that having the same mindset doesn't mean that you're thinking the same, but like, for instance, of having a mindset of curiosity or experimentation. Mm-hmm. I mean, those are kind of the mindsets that you'd probably want to bring in on these remote.
Exactly. Constant students are really good.
Yeah, learning as a mindset, indeed. That would be. Okay, so it sounds like your advice is always hire the best. Don't settle for people who are not part of who don't have your same values and your same mindset. Continue to look before you bring those people on. Does that categorize
absolutely.
it?
Whether it's for your internal team, for your external clients, maybe you have to sacrifice in the beginning for the client because you're trying to get off the ground and they're not the right fit, but know they're not the right fit and know when they need to leave, know the trigger, and build your roster how you want it to be built so that you're constantly raising the bar for yourself and for them.
Do you think you could ever go back to a day job in an office?
Never. Not a chance.
Really?
No. I'm like, I am so addicted to this, and I am so blessed when I talk to the team and we're all smiling. That's unheard of in accounting.
I was going to say, that doesn't sound like accounting. Yeah.
No, I have to you forget because, you set these new norms for yourself and you're like, oh, okay, well, I'm just used to this. And every once in a while you reflect back and I'm on the call with one of them and I'm like, hey, we all get along really well. How special is that? And they think back on their experiences and they're like, yeah, that is really cool. And it's just recognizing that and being grateful for it because it's why we're here. We only get one life, and it's really neat to be able to spend it with people that you appreciate.
Yeah, and that lift you up. I like the idea that people are strong on their own, but together we can do more together than we can on our own. And when you find that symbiosis, latch on, that's for sure. So last question, which is, how do people find more? I'm sure they can go to your website, hoppetax.com. And what are some of the other, is that the best place or are there other avenues?
Yeah, I would say anyone that's interested in the mindset or learning more, or even hearing anything about the direction I go, I'm an open book. I love to share everything. So on that realm, I post as much as I can about what our manifesto is, the tools that we use, how we use it, our guides on the webpage. It's hoppetax.com. And there's a blog section. You can also learn a bit more about where we file returns. Or email me directly. Like I said, we don't email each other internally, so the doors are wide open for you to send me a message.
Plenty of bandwidth on the email front for you. Yeah.
Yeah. And I would say the last two spots are, there's a book club section. I'm always leading out part of building that community around clients. I lead out a monthly book club and we have a Slack team for that. And we discuss the books, but really this is the time when we do meet in person for the ones that can. And anyone looking to sharpen their saw, that's a really good place and a resource to go for the latest and greatest. And finally, LinkedIn. I'll put ideas out there and share them. That Love Buffer, started using that a few months ago on scheduling posts, and you'll see things about remote working. I think I have one set up for like the 8 things CEOs of remote firms need to think about, and it's like this very do or die. Make sure you write it down. You got to be intent. It's all the good stuff that I was talking about wrapped up. And I'm like, great. Validated experiences. That's perfect.
It's exactly what people want to learn about. Well, thanks so much for sharing your experience. It's really motivating to see other people who are not, especially accountants, who are not out starting businesses that are profit first, that are also focused on happiness at work. I'm all for that. So thanks so much, Scott.
Thank you for having me on and being able to share a little bit of our story. And I look forward to hearing more from you and anyone else that's been listening.
Great. So thanks, everybody. Until next time, be powerful.